In the summer of 1971, Caleb Brown started his yellow Chevrolet Nova outside the Pulaski County Fair, his girlfriend Lisa Carter sitting beside him, holding a half-eaten apple pie. 20 minutes later, the car sped down a dirt road toward Lake Cumberland and vanished. No crash, no skid marks, no witnesses. The police concluded they might have run away, two teenagers in love, eager to escape their small town. But their parents didn't believe it. Every year on that same day, Lisa's mother still lights a candle on the porch, and Caleb's father keeps his varsity jacket hanging on the wall. As years passed, the disappearance became a shadow in Somerset's memory. Then in the fall of 2022, an old envelope sealed with red wax was found in the Kentucky State Police Archives. Inside were 3 sealed items: a green wool scarf, a chip of yellow paint, and a dried-up vial of motor oil. 3 small pieces of evidence, so minor no one expected they would stir a case buried for half a century back to life. Someone knew exactly where those 2 teenagers went. Someone kept that secret for 52 years, until time stopped protecting them. Before diving into this shocking true story, let us know where you're reading from, and if you love journeys to uncover forgotten justice, don't forget to subscribe to catch the next part. In the summer of 1971, Somerset, Pulaski County, Kentucky, was steeped in the humid heat and the scent of damp grass after a long southern summer day. The county fair had just ended, neon lights fading, leaving empty stalls, the smell of popcorn mingling with the diesel fumes from carnival rides. In the parking lot, car engines rumbled sporadically as the crowd dispersed. Caleb Brown, 17, and Lisa Carter, 16, walked out the main gate at 9:15 p.m. He wore a baseball cap and a short-sleeved shirt, carrying a stuffed bear Lisa had won at a game booth. She smiled softly, her light blonde hair falling over her shoulders. Caleb's 1968 yellow Chevrolet Nova was parked under old maple trees, its paint reflecting the sodium streetlights in a warm, hazy glow. The engine roared to life, a steady, throaty hum, and the car slowly pulled out of the lot, merging onto the southbound road along Lake Cumberland. On either side, thick fog rose from the water, blanketing rows of pines and rusted road signs. The headlights swept over reflective mile markers, casting patchy yellow light through the mist, before disappearing toward Red Creek, where the road wound tightly along the slope and vanished into the forest. By 10 p.m., Somerset fell quiet, save for the hum of insects and the wind-rattling tin warehouse roofs. The moonless, starless sky was pitch black, the lake's edge discernible only by the smell of water carried in the fog. No one in town knew that the yellow Nova had left Somerset and would never return. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the Brown family's yard, glinting off the white curtains in Caleb's room. His bed was untouched, blankets neat. His mother stood on the porch, staring down the empty dirt road, seeing only white fog clinging to the grass. She thought he might have stayed at a friend's, but by 8 o'clock, no calls came. Across town, the Carters grew anxious. Lisa hadn't come home, and their phone rang unanswered. The families called each other, hoping one of the kids was with the other, but there was only silence. By noon, worry turned to fear. Thomas Brown threw on a jacket, drove to the Carters' house. The 2 men spoke briefly, then canvassed the neighborhood, stopping at the gas station and diner, but no one had seen the kids or the yellow Nova. As the sun climbed high, casting harsh light on the roads, Thomas gripped the steering wheel, unwilling to wait longer. He turned toward the 2-story red brick building on Court Street, where a brass sign read Pulaski County Sheriff's Department. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and cigarettes. Thomas approached the front desk, placing Caleb's graduation photo and a copy of the car registration on the counter. His voice was hoarse and halting. "My son and his girlfriend haven't come home." The deputy on duty stared at Thomas Brown for a moment, then pulled out a notebook, listening as he recounted the events. Within minutes, the disappearance was relayed to the main office, and Sheriff Roy Campbell appeared. A tall man with graying hair and a stern gaze, Campbell had served Pulaski County for over 20 years. After hearing Thomas's story, he nodded to the clerk to open a new file, coded MP 1171. A sheet with the Pulaski County Sheriff's Department logo was placed on the desk, the first line reading, "Missing persons, Caleb Brown 17, Lisa Carter 16, last seen June 5, 1971, Somerset Fairgrounds." Simultaneously, initial details were broadcast over internal radio to patrol units. "Attention all units, report of 2 juveniles missing since Saturday night. Vehicle 1968, Chevrolet Nova, yellow Kentucky license 3J2974. Officers in Somerset, Science Hill and Burnside received the alert by noon, as sunlight slanted through the station's windows. That afternoon, Campbell and 2 deputies left the office to gather scene data. Their first stop was the fairgrounds, where the festivities had ended, leaving dismantled wooden frames and a scorched grass lot. The gatekeeper confirmed seeing Caleb and Lisa leave around 9:15 p.m., no signs of distress. Campbell noted the time, marking the first point on a Pulaski County map spread across his patrol car's hood. Next was the gas station near Lake Cumberland. The night clerk recalled the teens stopping for gas and asking for directions to Red Creek. The police verified the transaction via a receipt in the mechanical cash register, 9:33 p.m., 6.2 gallons. Campbell stared at the numbers, then marked a second red dot on the map. The line from the fairgrounds to the gas station stretched south along the lake, a short 11-mile route before the trail went cold. By late afternoon, Campbell led a patrol along Red Creek Road, a narrow dirt path skirting the lake, rarely traveled, flanked by pine forests and gentle slopes to the water. Fog thickened, visibility dropped, and tire tracks blended into fresh mud from the previous night's rain. Patrol car headlights swept the trees, casting yellow beams across the slick road. Deputy John Mercer bent down, picking up a small reflective metal fragment and bagging it, unidentified but logged. As night fell, the team returned to the office with initial notes, 2 witnesses, a suspicious route, and a few scattered clues insufficient for conclusions. In the office, Campbell spread the map on the desk, circling Red Creek and the east shore of Lake Cumberland, expanding the search radius by 5 miles. He ordered a volunteer rescue team mobilized, coordinating with the local fire department. 6 names were called that night: hunters, fishermen, and 2 retired deputies familiar with lake searches. Outside the office, phones rang incessantly, local press catching wind of the case, residents calling with questions. Campbell answered curtly, still searching. By 9 p.m., the office lights still burned. Caleb and Lisa's photo was clipped to the case file, with a note below, vehicle still missing, possible route, via Red Creek Road. Outside, cold wind blew from the lake, carrying water vapor and the distant hum of insects. A final patrol car left the lot, heading toward the wooden bridge, where the road cut through the hills. In the small Pulaski County Sheriff's office, Campbell closed his notebook, glancing at the wall clock. The hands read 11:20 p.m. He knew that from the moment case MP 1171 was opened, this was no longer just about finding 2 lost kids. It was now a mission for the entire Pulaski County force. After filing the case and collecting initial statements, Sheriff Roy Campbell didn't wait. He ordered a search at dawn, before the fog lifted and the faint traces from the night before vanished. Patrol cars, fire department vehicles, and a group of volunteers gathered at the edge of Red Creek's forest, where the narrow dirt road led to Lake Cumberland's shore. The air was thick with mud and diesel, dense fog blanketing the lake, limiting visibility to 10 meters. Campbell stood by a mile marker, adjusting a map on his patrol car's hood, directing split into 3 groups, 1 along the water, 2 on the pine forest trails. Stay in contact via radio. Engines roared, shattering the area's usual silence. The fire department deployed small boats with high-powered spotlights, scanning the lake. Police fanned out along the hillside, each carrying flashlights, ropes and evidence bags. The mud was slick, cold mist stung their faces, every step heavy, sinking into the ground. Along the red dirt road, they found faint tire tracks pressed deep into fresh mud, smaller than those of typical trucks. Campbell crouched to inspect, noting the mud had dried at the edges, suggesting they were from the previous night. He marked the spot with a wooden stake, snapped a Polaroid, and moved on. Nearby, at the base of a slope by the pines, a deputy shouted over the radio, "Oil slick." Campbell hurried over, the sharp smell of motor oil mixing with damp earth. A dark streak stretched 2 meters across the ground, soaked into moss and weeds. He wiped a sample with a cloth, sealed it in a plastic bag, labeled it as evidence. Nearby, broken branches and scattered leaves suggested something heavy had passed through. No shattered glass, no impact marks, just churned up earth. Campbell jotted it down, then paused, gazing at the misty lake where boat spotlights reflected thin white streaks. The water team reported via radio, nothing but mud and weeds. The steady hum of machinery mixed with lapping water, but no trace of the Nova or anything else. As the fog thinned, they moved to the old wooden bridge, a low stretch prone to flooding, where cars had skidded into the lake before. Volunteers used iron hooks to probe the water's edge, while others expanded into the forest. Each tire track was marked, photographed, time-stamped. By noon, Campbell regrouped everyone at the rendezvous, faces weathered by sun and mud. He reviewed the map on the hood. Red dots marked each checked point around the lake, but none showed signs of the car or teens. "We check again, then pull back at dusk," he said, voice low and hoarse with exhaustion. That afternoon, a sudden drizzle softened the soil, erasing most morning traces. Patrol car headlights swept wet bushes, casting glinting beams. No one spoke, only the squelch of boots in mud. As darkness enveloped the lake, colder winds rose, and Campbell signaled the search's end. He lingered at a Red Creek curve, where the dark oil stain still seeped into the ground, then scooped a handful of mud, smelling rust and burnt gas. The team packed up, returning to the office. The first report to Pulaski was typed: no vehicle, no bodies. Evidence: faint tire tracks, oil slick near Red Creek Forest. Somerset remained quiet, but a question began creeping into conversations: that something happened that night by Lake Cumberland, and why the only clues led to a place no one ever noticed. After 2 days of searching without results, Sheriff Campbell's investigative team remained stationed around the Red Creek area. Thick morning fog blanketed the lake and the forested shoreline, limiting visibility to just a few meters. Officer John Mercer, accompanied by a volunteer, patrolled the dirt road around the lake, combing through patches of eroded soil and wild grass along the path. Near a bend where the road hugged the hillside, Mercer spotted a small green object caught in low grass. He gently pulled it free. It was a thin wool scarf, soaked with dew and caked in mud, its fringed end torn. When brought back, Lisa's mother confirmed it was the scarf her daughter often wore when traveling. Campbell carefully noted it, labeling it Specimen 4A, then handed it to a technician for photographing and sealing in a clear plastic evidence bag. Near the scarf's location, another team found a glinting object in the soft soil, a pale yellow paint chip the size of a fingertip, flaked off a metal surface. Under a handheld magnifying glass, the chip showed traces of dirt and fine scratches. Campbell cautiously picked it up with tweezers, placed it in a separate envelope, and labeled it Specimen 4B. He examined the chip under dim light. The yellow matched the color of Caleb's Chevrolet Nova, but no conclusions could be drawn yet. Lower down, near the water's edge, a thin oil slick fanned out, mingling with mud and decayed leaves. The smell of fuel was still distinct, despite the previous night's rain washing most of it away. An officer knelt, collected a sample with a pipette, and sealed it in a vial labeled Specimen 4C. The 3 pieces of evidence were carefully placed in a metal box, wrapped securely in thick plastic. Campbell signed the report, jotting his familiar note in blue ink: under review, pending lab results. The scene was photographed, coordinates measured, and locations marked on a military map. Back at the office, he ordered the 4A, 4C samples stored separately in the main evidence locker, accompanied by Field Report Number 02. The report stated clearly, no vehicle located, no signs of foul play. Evidence collected, fabric, paint chip, oil residue. The final conclusion of the preliminary report was succinct: insufficient evidence to determine criminal activity. Yet Campbell felt uneasy. That afternoon, he sat in his office, reviewing the journey map pinned to the wall from the fair to the gas station, then Red Creek, 3 red dots connected by a winding line, stopping at the evidence site. Outside the window, Somerset's sky was cloaked in dull gray, with misty rain speckling the glass and cold lake air drifting through. The steady clack of the secretary's typewriter echoed as she finalized the storage log. Campbell opened his notebook, scribbling in the margin, fabric scarf, confirmed by Carter family. Paint chip, suspected Nova 1968, oil slick, type unconfirmed. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling for a long while, his mind restless. Though the report stated insufficient evidence for criminal activity, the details stirred unease. The scarf found at the oil slick's location, the paint chip matching the car's color, and the mere meters to the lake's edge. If it was an accident, he thought, the car should be down there. But 2 days of boat searches had revealed nothing in the lake, too deep, too muddy, with rudimentary equipment unable to scan thoroughly. Campbell added a note: recheck area near Red Creek, slope, low visibility, possible submerged object. He closed the notebook and stood, gazing outside. Dusk was settling, raindrops growing heavier, pattering on the tin roof. Outside, the patrol car sat still under a streetlight. In Campbell's mind, a nagging doubt lingered unanswered: if not an accident, where had the 2 kids gone? And if something sinister had happened, the only traces now lay in 3 small specimens, labeled 4A, 4B, and 4C, seemingly insignificant evidence that might be all that remained as time marched on. In the following days, with the lake search yielding no results, Sheriff Campbell shifted focus to tracing the routes Caleb and Lisa might have taken on the night they vanished. He summoned additional witnesses from southern Somerset, particularly along Highway 27 and the road to Red Creek, marked as the last place the teens were seen. A few locals reported seeing car headlights moving slowly along that route, around 9:30 p.m., but none could confirm definitively. On the 3rd day, a new witness emerged. The owner of an auto parts store near the lake's gas station reported that after the fair, someone saw a yellow Chevrolet Nova at Marvin Hale Auto Garage, about 2 miles away. The name caught Campbell's attention. The garage belonged to Marvin Hale, a 42-year-old local who'd been fixing cars for over 15 years. Campbell and 2 officers visited him that afternoon. Hale's garage sat isolated at the town's edge, on a dirt road leading to the lake, a weathered tin shed reeking of oil and metal. As the officers entered, Hale was under a truck, hands greasy, face tanned, with a sparse beard. Campbell introduced himself, presented the investigation notice, and asked directly, "Did you see 2 youths in a yellow Chevrolet Nova that night?" Hale looked up, wiping his hands on a rag, his voice calm. "Yeah, around 9-something, they stopped to ask for directions to Red Creek. I told them to go straight over the bridge and turn right. That's it. Nothing else to it." Campbell pressed, "Did they ask for help? Any issues with the car?" Hale shook his head, answering evenly, "No, car sounded fine. The 2 looked happy, probably just out for fun." The statement was recorded on the spot, Hale's signature scrawled under witness statement, "No further information." As they left, Campbell scanned the area. The backyard was cluttered with old car frames, worn tires, and stacked oil drums, with a pine forest stretching to the lake in the distance. He frowned slightly, but said nothing. That evening, in the police station's small meeting room, Campbell briefed the team. "If Hale's statement is true, he's the last to see the kids alive. but we've got nothing to contradict him. The collected evidence, scarf, paint chip, oil slick, awaited lab results, while worsening weather and heavy rain halted search efforts. Campbell ordered a small team to recheck the area around Hale's garage. They swept the fence line and yard corners with flashlights, but found only old tire tracks and aged oil puddles, nothing notable. Everything seemed normal, too normal for the unease Campbell felt. If they were just asking for directions, why take this road at night, when there's a shorter route? The question gnawed at him all night. He reopened the route map. Caleb and Lisa's journey from the fair to home should have taken less than 15 minutes, but their chosen path veered deep toward the lake. Their last confirmed sighting was at the gas station, not far from Hale's garage, where Lisa's scarf was found. It could all be coincidence, but the map's dots, fair, gas station, garage, oil slick, formed a straight line ending at Red Creek. Still, Campbell had no grounds for accusations or searches. It was all suspicion. In the next day's internal report, he wrote briefly, "Last confirmed sighting, Hale Auto Garage, approximately 9:30 p.m. No evidence of foul play at this time." Case file MP 1171 was updated with Hale's statement and temporarily closed, filed under review. Somerset resumed its routine, but inside the station, notes pinned around the map remained like fresh red ink linking an unfinished journey. 2 weeks after the teens' disappearance, searches along Lake Cumberland yielded no results. Kentucky entered mid-June, with persistent rain and rising lake levels making underwater searches increasingly difficult. Rescue teams persisted, rowing boats and casting iron hooks around Red Creek, but pulled up only driftwood, debris and thick algae. Pulaski County Police received dozens of daily calls. Some claimed seeing a yellow Nova in a neighboring county. Others reported hearing an engine at night, but all led to dead ends. Every lead evaporated like mist on the lake. Sheriff Roy Campbell was nearing exhaustion. In his office, the Pulaski County map on the wall was tattered at the edges, studded with red pins marking search points, none offering solid clues. His typed preliminary report, on carbon paper, was sent to the state, with a brief conclusion: vehicle and subjects not recovered. No further leads available. By month's end, the case was classified as inactive, still open but no longer actively investigated. The evidence locker was sealed, with specimens 4A4C, stored in a steel box, labeled Pulaski County 1971, Brown Carter case. On the case file's cover, "Under review" was crossed out in red ink. Campbell was dissatisfied, but lacked resources to continue. Funding dried up, the search team disbanded, and Somerset life normalized. Locals spoke less of the disappearance. Posters around the market square faded under rain and sun, leaving only sticky tape stains on poles. The Brown and Carter families clung to hope, but months later, no new information surfaced. Police visits dwindled, asking routine questions before falling silent. Marvin Hale, the garage owner where the teens were last seen, remained in town, opening his shop daily, as if nothing had happened. His garage expanded, replacing its old wooden sign with a shiny metal one reading Hale Auto Service. People brought cars for repairs, greeted him as usual, and avoided mentioning that night. When asked, Hale said only, "They stopped to ask for directions, that's all." That answer followed him for decades. In Pulaski County's evidence vault, the steel box was moved in late 1972, when the old storage room deteriorated. At Frankfort, and clerk mislabeled specimens 4AE4C, linking them to an unrelated 1971 traffic accident. From then, the Brown-Carter evidence vanished within the system, buried among thousands of files. Years passed, the case reduced to a thin folder in the third drawer, its cover browned, held by a rusty clip. Campbell retired in the early 1980s, haunted by the unresolved case. Successive sheriffs reopened it briefly, but gave up. By the late 1990s, Most townsfolk forgot the incident. Only the two families occasionally placed flowers by the lake, where Lisa's scarf was found. Somerset remained peaceful. Small shops, churches, farmers' markets, but beneath the calm, Lake Cumberland's silence held an untold secret. Marvin Hale, now middle-aged, became a community fixture, attending local church, sponsoring youth baseball, even speaking on perseverance and faith. No one mentioned that night. Search team members passed away, or moved. Case file MP 1171 and its evidence box were swallowed by time. In Pulaski County's early 2000 summary report, the Brown-Carter disappearance was listed in one line: case inactive, subjects not recovered. For nearly half a century, it remained an open but untouched case, gathering dust in a dark filing cabinet, waiting for another generation to uncover why two kids from 1971 never came home. Nearly half a century after the disappearance of Caleb Brown and Lisa Carter faded into obscurity, case file MP 1171 remained untouched in a metal storage cabinet at the Frankfort Central Archive. That basement held thousands of unresolved Kentucky cases, dusty files stacked high, paper labels faded, handwritten notes smudged by time. In the fall of 2022, when the Kentucky State Police KSP launched the Legacy Case Reassessment Program, a project to digitize and reevaluate all old missing persons cases, a special team of investigators was formed. Sergeant Naomi Whitaker, head of the Cold Case Unit, along with 3 young technicians, began long days under the pale fluorescent lights of the archive. Their work seemed tedious, checking evidence boxes, cross-referencing codes, scanning data into a new digital system. But on an otherwise ordinary afternoon, Naomi stumbled upon something that made her pause. In row F, tucked between 2 boxes of 1972 traffic accident files, was an old mislabeled paper envelope. Scrawled on the front was Pulaski 1971, specimen 4A4C, do not discard, sealed with faded red wax. Naomi frowned, placed the envelope on the table, put on gloves, and checked the label. The record slip noted, transferred from Pulaski County Sheriff's Office, December 1972. She cross-checked the logbook and electronic database, but no code matched 4A4C. This is odd, she muttered, a case not in the system. A gut feeling prompted her to carefully break the old seal, revealing 3 discolored plastic bags, a stained green fabric scrap, a piece of pale yellow paint, and a vial containing dried black oil. Each bore handwritten labels, bold and slanted, specimen 4A4B, 4C. A musty, oily smell wafted out, clear evidence the envelope hadn't been opened since sealing. Naomi placed the items in an evidence tray, scanned them for images, and searched the old paper catalog. After nearly an hour, she found a brief entry from 1971, Pulaski County, missing persons, Brown Carter, inactive. She paused, staring at the words. Pulaski 1971, an unresolved double disappearance, never subjected to modern forensic analysis. Naomi immediately reported to Lieutenant Colonel Dennis Holloway, the project supervisor. He approved re-examination of the evidence. The next day, the Pulaski 1971 envelope was transported by secure vehicle to the Frankfort Forensic Lab, accompanied by a new evidence transfer log signed by Naomi Whitaker and head technician Dylan Pierce. They decided to conduct DNA and chemical reanalysis, tests unavailable in the 1970s. Upon receiving the evidence box, Dylan Pierce, a veteran of KSP cold cases, was intrigued. On the lab table, under cold white light, sat the 3 items, the frayed green fabric, the chipped yellow paint, and the vial of hardened black oil. All were aged, but the labels remained intact, written in the steady fountain pen script of a different era of investigators who trusted paper over data. Dylan noted in his log, Pulaski 1971, sample condition, fair, packaging intact, suitable for DNA extraction. He assigned a new digital code, KSP FR 2022, 1171, officially reopening the case after 51 years of neglect. Naomi watched from the observation room as technicians in gloves and masks prepared DNA extraction tools. The 2022 technology far surpassed Sheriff Roy Campbell's era. A few fabric fibers or stray cells could yield a genetic profile. As the centrifuge hummed, Naomi opened the newly scanned original file, yellowed pages, coffee-stained corners, text nearly faded. Each page bore Sheriff Campbell's signature. His final report line read, "Evidence under review. Possible oil and paint traces, pending further examination." Naomi gave a faint smile, as if speaking to a colleague from the past. "You'll get your answers now, Sheriff," she whispered. When the computer screen flashed the first result, successful DNA extraction, the room fell silent. The old fabric held partial DNA, enough to match against the missing persons database. Both Naomi and Dylan were stunned that a case thought dead could be revived from 3 forgotten samples. In her internal KSP report that weekend, Naomi wrote concisely, "Recovered sealed evidence from Pulaski County 1971, likely linked to missing persons case Brown Carter. Samples successfully reactivated for modern analysis. Awaiting results." Outside, Frankfurt basked in a warm golden sunset, the Kentucky River reflecting the day's last light behind the lab. In the lit archive room, the Pulaski 1971 envelope sat on the desk, its new seal dry. After over half a century, case MP 1171 was officially reopened, and with it the story of 2 teenagers who vanished in 1971, stepped back into the light. As the Pulaski 1971 envelope was resealed and entered into testing, the Frankfurt Forensic Lab seemed to hold its breath awaiting results. Over half a century had passed since the samples were collected, and no one was certain they retained viable biological traces. Sergeant Naomi Whitaker monitored the process through the observation glass. Technician Dylan Pierce carefully opened each bag, using tweezers to place the green fabric on a stainless steel table, inspecting it under UV light. In the purple glow, faint white spots appeared, dried stains, possibly sweat or bodily fluids. Pierce used a scalpel to extract a small fiber, placed it in a vial, and began micro-DNA extraction via polymerase chain reaction, a gene amplification technique thousands of times more sensitive than past technologies. After nearly 2 hours, the first signal appeared on the monitor, a complete genetic sequence, viable for analysis. As the data uploaded, the software cross-referenced the National Missing Persons Database, NAMU. Minutes later, the result flashed, positive match, 99.87% probability, subject, Caleb Brown, MP 1171, Pulaski County, Kentucky. Naomi stood frozen, eyes fixed on the alert. The micro-DNA, from the dried stain on the scarf, perfectly matched a sample stored in the Brown family's profile from 2009, when voluntary DNA collection for missing persons families began. After over 50 years, the first identity was confirmed. A part of Caleb remained on the once-forgotten evidence. The results were sent directly to KSP, marking a turning point. But Naomi pressed on, requesting analysis of the remaining samples, the yellow paint chip and dried oil. Sample 4B, the paint, was placed under an electron microscope. At 1,000x magnification, it revealed 3 layers, gray primer, pale yellow base, and a glossy protective coat, matching the structure of paint used on 1971 Chevrolet C10 trucks, manufactured at General Motors' Missouri plant. Pierce cross-checked the PPG 5102 paint code in the technical database, confirming a 100% match. Naomi reviewed Kentucky's 1971 vehicle registrations. Only 6 yellow Chevrolet C10s were registered, 1 belonging to Marvin Hale, owner of the garage where Caleb and Lisa were last seen. The pieces were aligning chillingly. The lab then analyzed carpet fibers embedded in the 4A fabric. Under a spectroscope, the synthetic fibers appeared gray-brown, with a double twist structure unique to GM truck carpets of the early 1970s. Dillon compared them to an industrial materials database, confirming a perfect match with the original 1971 Chevrolet C10 floor mats. He looked at Naomi and said softly, "This can't be a coincidence. He was in Hale's truck." Naomi didn't respond, only jotting in her notebook, "Physical link established, victim DNA, on material consistent with suspect's vehicle." For the first time in over 50 years, physical evidence tied a victim to a suspect. The 3-page forensic report, completed that night, concluded, 1. Biological evidence consistent with subject Caleb Brown, identified on fabric specimen 4A2 paint chip 4B, and fiber trace match manufacturing pattern of 1971 Chevrolet C10 truck. 3. Oil sample 4C, consistent with GM 350 V8 engine lubricant profile, 1970 to 1972, all pointed to one source, Marvin Hale's truck. Naomi sat late in the empty office, rereading every signature, every printed microscope image. What Sheriff Campbell's team collected in 1971, seemingly trivial fragments, had with new technology become the most solid evidence. She felt a mix of awe and unease. Time's patience had brought justice back, however late. By morning, the Frankfurt Lab's official report was sent to KSP headquarters with a recommendation: reopen case MP 1171. Evidence indicates potential involvement of subject Marvin Hale, Pulaski County. That afternoon, at KSP headquarters, Lieutenant Colonel Dennis Holloway called an urgent meeting. The report lay on the table, positive match underlined in red. Holloway read aloud, voice slow but firm, "We have the victim's DNA, evidence matching Hale's truck, and a case forgotten for 51 years. It's time to reopen it." Naomi Whitaker nodded silently, gazing out the window at Frankfurt's light rain, droplets rippling in circles. Outside, cars passed on the wet road, but in her mind was one thought: if this evidence was real, and every fact suggested it was, Marvin Hale's truck had carried Caleb Brown somewhere that night, in 1971, and neither teenager ever returned. For the first time since that day, the Brown-Carter disappearance was no longer an anonymous mystery in a cold file cabinet. It had entered a new phase, one where every piece of evidence now had a voice. Following the confirmed forensic results, case MP 1171 was officially reopened. An internal KSP memo was sent to all Central Command units, boldly titled, "Reinvestigation Authorization, Pulaski County Missing Persons Case 1971. From a dusty archive file, the disappearance of Caleb Brown and Lisa Carter became a state priority. Sergeant Naomi Whitaker was appointed lead investigator, working with KSP's cold case unit. On the first morning in the Somerset office, she and 2 young investigators, Ryan Ford and Lillian Cho, sat around an old wooden table, spreading out 1971 Pulaski County maps. The yellowed paper, with faded symbols, still showed Red Creek's scar-like curve along Lake Cumberland. Naomi placed a modern map beside it, using a laser pointer to compare areas. The southern pine forest had been partially cleared, new roads cut through hills, but the site of Marvin Hale's former garage stood out, now a small industrial area, with a mechanic shop sign, and an old parking lot. If the evidence matches Hale's truck carpet, we need to know where that C10 went, where it stopped, Naomi said, her voice low but firm. She tapped the map at Hale Auto, 1971. About 300 yards away, an empty lot stretched behind, noted in old records as unused lot, fenced area. A local elder recalled that in the early 1970s, the lot was a makeshift junkyard, where Hale and mechanics dumped wrecked cars, scrap metal, and old oil drums. It was later paved over for a warehouse but never excavated. The comment silenced the team momentarily. Naomi requested satellite imagery, and recent land survey data from the land registry. When the infrared images arrived, the area behind Hale's garage showed uneven dark patches, compacted soil differing from its surroundings, suggesting buried metal. If a vehicle or heavy object was buried, it would look like this, a geotechnical analyst explained. Naomi froze, recalling Sheriff Campbell's 1971 note, possible slope accident, no vehicle recovered. That line now felt like a warning. She stepped onto the second-floor balcony, looking down at Somerset's main road. Dusk fell, light rain misted, and pickup trucks passed like echoes of the past. Over 50 years, she whispered, but everything's still in its place. That evening, at KSP's temporary Somerset meeting room, the team reconstructed the route from June 5, 1971. A digital map glowed on a large screen, from the Pulaski Fair to the lakeside gas station, then Hale's garage, and finally, the Red Creek area where evidence was found. Each point was color-coded, forming a 17-minute journey that no one could explain. Lillian Cho presented the timeline analysis. If they left the fair at 9:15 p.m., stopped at the gas station by 9:33, they'd reach Hale Auto around 9:40. After that, no further records. Around 10 o'clock, a witness near Red Creek Hill heard an engine stop. So after leaving the garage, they vanished within 20 minutes. Ryan Ford added, Hale said they only asked for directions, but the route doesn't make sense. From his garage to Red Creek Hill, you'd pass through the lot behind the shop, unpaved back then. A truck could slip in wet conditions. Naomi silently reviewed Hale's 1971 interrogation transcript. His recorded voice trembled slightly, but his answers were short, firm, almost rehearsed. He might have told half the truth. Naomi said, eyes fixed on Campbell's note, Hale last seen with both victims. No evidence of foul play. The team agreed. They needed a warrant to search the old lot behind Hale's garage, now owned by Somerset Machine Parts, purchased in 1998. Naomi tasked Ryan with contacting the Pulaski County Court and the District Attorney's Office to prepare legal documents. She knew that to secure an excavation warrant, they needed a strong case, and the DNA evidence and physical findings from the Frankfurt lab were the key. That night, Naomi stayed late. On her desk, she spread out 2 old Polaroid photos from Sheriff Campbell, showing 1971 oil stains and tire tracks. Beside them was the new infrared image of the lot behind Hale's garage. The 2 images, separated by half a century, aligned at one point, a long dark streak stretching from the main road to the forest's edge. She nodded slightly, exhaled softly, and called the command office. Prepare the land survey equipment. We're heading to Pulaski tomorrow morning. Something's under that soil, and I want to know what it is. On the other end, Holloway's voice was low and curt. Approved. From now on, MP 1171 isn't just a missing persons case, Whitaker. This is a criminal investigation. The next morning, in the Kentucky State Police office in Somerset, a heavy atmosphere hung over the small meeting room. The Pulaski County map remained spread across the table, littered with red pins marking old search locations, now joined by a bold circle around the lot behind Marvin Hale's garage, once a junkyard. Sergeant Naomi Whitaker, in her dark uniform, placed a thick file on the table. It contained all the forensic results from the Frankfurt lab, copies of 1971 evidence reports, and a route analysis reconstructed with the latest satellite data. This is everything we have, she said, her voice calm but resolute. DNA from evidence item 4, A matches Caleb Brown. The carpet fiber matches the structure of a 1971 Chevrolet C10, and that vehicle was registered to Marvin Hale. Everything points to one place, the lot behind his shop. Her words silenced the room. Ryan Ford, a young investigator, flipped to a page of infrared aerial maps, pointing to an area with unusually dark soil patches. This is where Hale dumped scrap, Geological data shows the ground here was compacted, with signs of repeated digging and filling. Naomi nodded, then turned to the county prosecutor, Commonwealth's attorney Mark Ellison, who had been called in to review the search warrant application. Ellison, known for his conservative stance, always demanded clear evidence before signing off on coercive orders. He opened the file, reading each page carefully, occasionally pausing to ask for details. "This evidence was collected in 1971, he asked, his tone skeptical. Naomi replied promptly, "Yes, sir, collected, sealed, and accidentally misplaced in the state's storage. But the DNA samples remain intact and have been verified with current technology." Ellison nodded slightly, his fingers tapping lightly on the page. "And the suspect, he still lives in Pulaski?" "Yes," Naomi answered. "Marvin Hale, 73 years old, owns a small house on the outskirts of Somerset, still runs the garage and the old lot, now rented out as a parking area. He's never been convicted, but he was the last person to see the two victims alive." Ellison raised an eyebrow. How did he react when he learned the case was reopened? "We don't know yet," Naomi said. "We haven't approached him directly, but to do so we need your warrant." The room fell silent. Outside the window, a light drizzle speckled the parking lot. Ellison reread the forensic summary, his eyes lingering on the bolded line, "Biological link established between victim and vehicle, registered to Marvin Hale." He looked up at Naomi. "I need to be certain this lot is still under his ownership." Ryan promptly handed over land records. The cadastral file confirmed the old junkyard remained within the boundaries of Hale Auto. Transferred to Somerset Machine Parts in 1998, but still managed by Hale. Naomi added, "That area has never been excavated or surveyed by any agency since 1971. If something's hidden there, it could have been buried under that soil for over 50 years. Ellison sat still, removed his glasses, and set his pen down. "I have to admit, this is one of the strangest files I've ever seen," he said slowly. "Half a century gone, evidence still intact, DNA still viable, and the man still living in the same place. If this was a crime, it's been asleep too long." Naomi leaned forward, her voice firm. "Sir, we can't let it sleep any longer." Ellison looked at her for a long moment, then sighed. He pulled the file toward him, signed the line under request for search warrant, Pulaski County, Hale property, and affixed the court's embossed seal. "You have your warrant," he said. "But I want the entire process recorded and tightly sealed. If there's anything under that ground, I don't want any mistakes." Naomi nodded, a mix of relief and tension rising in her chest. She stood, shook Ellison's hand, thanked him briefly, and turned to the investigative team. "We have 48 hours to prepare. Survey equipment, magnetic scanners, forensic team, everything needs to be ready." That afternoon, as she left the courthouse, Somerset was still cloaked in drizzle. Naomi hurried through the parking lot, where puddles reflected the gray sky. She clutched the search warrant, printed on heavy paper, the Commonwealth's red seal glowing faintly in the dim light. In her mind was a single image, the lot behind Hale's shop, where the ground was tightly packed, where old reports had ended with insufficient basis. But now, with Ellison's signature, that phrase was erased. For the first time in over half a century, the investigative team had the authority to return to where it all began. Naomi got into her car, turned on the siren, and the black SUV rolled out of the lot. In the passenger seat, Ryan flipped through the warrant, smiling. "Justice comes late, but it's finally on its way." Naomi didn't respond. She just stared ahead, where the wet road led to Pulaski, and where that silent plot of land awaited awakening from 50 years of burial. 2 days after the search warrant was signed, a convoy of Kentucky State Police vehicles rolled into the southern edge of Somerset, where Hale Auto Service once stood. The old shop sat nestled in a narrow valley, backed by pine forest, with a vacant lot behind it now overgrown with weeds and bordered by a rusty fence. Last night's rain left the soil heavy and damp, the air thick with the scent of iron and old motor oil. Sergeant Naomi Whitaker stood at the edge of the lot, dressed in a bright hazmat suit, holding a site map and the plastic-encased warrant. Beside her, the state's 6-person forensic team began setting up equipment, magnetic scanners, ground-penetrating radar, and cameras probing deep into the mud. Every action was recorded by 2 fixed cameras, per the chain of custody protocol required by Prosecutor Ellison. In the distance, a few curious locals stood behind a barricade, watching silently, their faces a mix of curiosity and fear. Many remembered the 1970s, when this place was Hale's temporary junkyard, piled with wrecked cars, scrap metal and oil drums. Now it was a knee-high field of grass, eerily quiet. The magnetic scanner began its work, sweeping the lot in a grid pattern. A steady hum filled the chilly, damp air. After nearly 10 minutes, the screen displayed the first signal, a large metal object buried nearly 5 feet deep, about 20 yards from the shop's edge. Naomi stepped over, studied the waveform, and ordered the area marked. 2 forensic technicians began digging a small test trench, carefully peeling back layers of soil. Within minutes, the top of a rusted metal frame emerged, a warped piece of steel with signs of charring. "Car frame," one technician whispered. Naomi nodded, crouching to inspect it. Under the beam of a spotlight, faint traces of pale yellow paint remained on the metal's edge, identical to the paint sample in evidence item 4. She signaled to halt digging, ordering a portable canopy erected, and the formal excavation process to begin. The forensic team cordoned off the site, took photos, recorded GPS coordinates, and used specialized brushes to clear soil around the object. The deeper they dug, the more metal fragments appeared: bolts, a door handle, a section of a windshield frame. Beneath the mud, they found a small ring, wedged between 2 rusted bars. Naomi leaned in, picked it up with tweezers, and held it to the light. On its face, faintly legible, was the inscription, "Pulaski High, Class of '71. The team fell silent. Naomi said nothing, only opened an evidence bag, placed the ring inside, labeled it Specimen 9A, and noted, "High school ring recovered at Hale Auto Site, initials CB inscribed." Inside the ring, the letters CB were still clearly etched. Nearby, a technician continued sifting thin layers of soil around the car frame. A soft exclamation broke the silence. "Fabric, here." They crouched together, and under the wet soil, a dark piece of denim emerged. The fabric decayed, but its stitching still intact. Naomi signaled to stop, photographed the scene, then used a soil knife to cut around the area, lifting the entire section into a stainless steel tray. "Seal it per standard protocol," she said, her voice low and restrained. The fabric was labeled Specimen 9B, signed, and sealed on site under the camera's lens. Nearby, a half-buried metal drum was pulled up, containing old tire fragments, a charred seat frame, and a few wire scraps with electrical connectors. These seemingly mundane items formed a disturbing image. This was once the body of a dismantled vehicle. As afternoon sunlight filtered through the trees, the entire lot had been turned over. A large warped steel section was hoisted up by cables, peeling away old yellow paint, the color confirmed by the FES system, the lab report as belonging to a 1968 Chevrolet Nova. Naomi stood watching, her grip tightening on her notebook, a mix of dread and certainty rising within her. She ordered the forensic team to thoroughly check the surrounding area. No bones or human tissue were found, but beneath the car frame, they uncovered a torn leather wallet, empty of papers, but containing a small oval metal plate, faintly engraved with Somerset Motor Club. All evidence was collected, sealed, and labeled in the chain of custody. Specimen 9A, Class Ring 9B, denim fragment, 9C, steel frame, and related materials, 9D, leather wallet, 9E, soil samples around the vehicle. Everything was placed in electronically sealed storage containers. When the report was finalized, Naomi ordered a final sweep of the site. She walked the lot, her boots caked in mud, her eyes scanning the scene, a past buried for over 50 years now exposed. No one spoke, only the sound of wind rustling through the forest and the wet thud of collapsing soil. In the distance, Fire truck lights flashed against the darkening sky. Naomi looked up, whispering, "Everything Sheriff Campbell searched for and never found. It's all here." She signed the site report, the line scene excavation completed, materials recovered and sealed, chain of custody established, printed and filed under Case MP 1171. The evidence containers were loaded onto a specialized vehicle, sealed under the prosecutor's representative's supervision. As the vehicle drove off, Naomi stood staring at the lot, now a deep pit filled with the cold metallic scent of wet earth. A light drizzle began to fall, mixing with the mud, heavy droplets, landing on the steel exposed to light for the first time in half a century. Beneath that ground, a piece of the truth had begun to awaken, and Somerset, after years of silence, was about to face the past it had tried to forget. As the evidence excavated from the lot behind Hale's garage was transferred to the Kentucky State Police storage facility, the investigation officially entered the cross-referencing phase. Sergeant Naomi Whitaker knew that only legal evidence and an accurate timeline could turn those metal fragments into criminal proof. She began by revisiting Marvin Hale's 1971 statements, a digitized recording of his hoarse, hesitant voice, firmly claiming, "I saw them around 9:30 at night. They asked for directions to Red Creek. I told them to go straight and turn right. That's all. I went home right after." Sheriff Campbell's old report noted that Hale claimed to have left the garage at 9:45 and was home by 10 p.m. Naomi underlined the time, then accessed the state's tax archives on her computer. Hale's 1971 tax records showed 3 full-time employees and 1 part-time worker, but the attached timesheet revealed an anomaly. No one signed in on June 5, despite the garage staying open late. A major question mark emerged. Naomi contacted the business archives, requesting payroll records and oil delivery receipts from Hale Auto for 1971. 2 days later, the data arrived. Hale ordered 20 gallons of motor oil on the afternoon of June 5, signed for at 8:55 p.m., just 20 minutes before Caleb and Lisa left the fair. This placed him at the garage during the exact window the teens passed by. Naomi wrote in large letters in her notebook, "Confirmed presence, Hale on site during missing window." Next she tracked down an old witness, Raymond Young, a gas station worker near Lake Cumberland, the last person to see Caleb and Lisa alive. Now in his 70s, Raymond lived in a small house, a few miles from Somerset. When Naomi and investigator Ryan Ford arrived, he was surprised to hear the case mentioned. "I thought people forgot about it," he said, his voice rough but sharp. Naomi placed a photo of Hale's old garage in front of him. Raymond stared, then slowly recounted, "That night, I was working the late shift. The 2 kids stopped by, bought drinks, asked for directions. I remember because about an hour after they left, Hale came back. He was wearing coveralls, mud on his shoulders and arms. I asked why he was out so late. He said a customer's car broke down, had to push it uphill. I thought it was odd because it was dry that night, no rain, but he was covered in mud." Naomi stared intently. "Are you sure it was the same night?" Raymond nodded, positive. "I worked the night shift for 5 years straight. I never forgot that." She took notes, asking him to sign a new statement. This was a critical detail, absent from the 1971 files, evidence that Hale didn't go home before 10 o'clock, as claimed, but reappeared at the gas station after midnight, dirty with soil. Back at the office, Naomi had the team reconstruct the timeline of the disappearance. On the large screen, the timeline appeared. 9:15 p.m., Caleb and Lisa left the fair. 9:33, they stopped at the gas station. 9:40, they were at Hale's garage. 10 o'clock, an engine sound was heard near Red Creek. 11:45, Hale returned to the gas station. The teens' path ended after leaving the garage. Hale, however, moved in the opposite direction, back toward Lake Cumberland during the window of their disappearance. A red arrow on the map stretched from the garage to the junkyard, and back to the gas station, precisely matching the location of the excavated metal frame. Ryan presented the cross-reference report. DNA evidence confirms Caleb was in Hale's vehicle. The witness proves Hale left the garage later than stated. Tax and oil delivery records place him at the scene when the victims vanished. Naomi nodded, her voice low. We just broke the core of his 1971 statement. To strengthen the case, she contacted the state's Department of Vehicle Records, requesting data on Hale's registered vehicles. Records showed the yellow Chevrolet C10 was sold in 1973, just 2 years after the disappearance, with no prior inspection reports, an unusual move. He got rid of the vehicle right after the case died down, Naomi said. If it was just a business truck, why change it so quickly? The investigators nodded in agreement. The pieces now fit: a false statement, a corroborating witness, matching physical evidence. Late that afternoon, Naomi submitted a nearly 20-page report to Commonwealth's attorney Mark Ellison. The conclusion was bolded: discrepancy established between 1971 testimony and verified timeline. Witness Raymond Young confirms suspect's presence after midnight, with mud-stained clothing. Physical evidence aligns with suspect's vehicle and property. Probable cause for criminal investigation established. Signing the report, Naomi sat silently, listening to the ticking clock on the wall. Outside, Somerset sky darkened, a light rain falling, streetlights reflecting off puddles where patrol cars parked. She knew this was no longer a missing persons case. Every sign pointed to a crime, and its perpetrator had been living quietly in this town for over half a century. When the case reconciliation report was submitted to the prosecutor's office, Naomi Whitaker knew the decisive moment had arrived. All the evidence, from conflicting statements to physical items and forensic results, pointed to one person, Marvin Hale. But to secure a charge, they needed final, irrefutable biological evidence directly linking him to the 1971 samples. She submitted a proposal for covert surveillance to the KSP commander and received approval that same day. A special task force was formed, codenamed Operation Cumberland, with the mission monitor Hale's activities, collect DNA samples legally, and avoid revealing the objective. Hale, now 73, lived in a single-story log cabin on the edge of Somerset, just over a mile from the old garage. Neighbors described him as quiet, reserved, still tending his garden, and driving an old pickup truck to church every Sunday. The surveillance team installed 2 camouflaged cameras on a utility pole across from his house, establishing a 24-hour monitoring schedule. For the first 2 weeks, Hale's behavior was unremarkable. He went to the market, repaired a generator, occasionally spoke with delivery workers, but Naomi knew that long silence often concealed something more sinister. She instructed the intelligence team to collect Hale's household trash on the designated pickup day, right after the garbage truck left the neighborhood. On Monday morning, the collection team, dressed in plain clothes, waited at the end of the road. When the truck stopped, they retrieved the bag labeled Hale Residence, 147 Red Creek Road, placed it in an evidence container, sealed it, and signed the chain of custody log. The bag was immediately transported to the Frankfurt Forensic Lab under Naomi's supervision. There, technician Dylan Pierce, who had analyzed the original samples, personally opened the bag, using new gloves and sterile tweezers to examine each item. Inside were a water bottle, cigarette pack, tissue, and an old toothbrush. Dylan extracted fibers from the toothbrush, isolating epithelial cell DNA from hair follicles, and collected a sample from the tissue with dried sweat. In the lab, test tubes were placed in a centrifuge, DNA extracted via micro methods, and compared to the sweat sample found on the car carpet. Evidence item 4A from 1971. Naomi sat in the observation room, watching the process unfold on the screen, genetic sequences aligning into a long graph. About an hour later, the result appeared on the main monitor: DNA match. Probability 99.994%, Sample 2023 Hale vs. Specimen 4A 1971. The lab fell silent. Dylan looked up, eyes wide. Perfect match, Naomi. It can't be anyone else. She only nodded, gripping the case file tightly, and whispered, "We've got him." That afternoon, Naomi drafted a forensic biology report and sent it directly to Commonwealth's attorney Mark Ellison. The bolded subject line read, "Confirmed DNA linkage between suspect Marvin Hale and historical evidence. Brown-Carter case." Below, she signed her name and sealed it with the KSP stamp. The report had 4 sections: description of the legal sample collection process, chain of custody log, DNA comparison results, and investigative conclusion, all airtight, no legal gaps. In the final paragraph, she wrote, "Genetic match conclusively identifies Marvin Hale as biological contributor to material found on specimen collected June 1971. Probable cause established for homicide investigation." When Ellison read the report, he looked up at Naomi, his gaze both stern and grave. "Do you realize what this means?" he asked. "After over half a century, we're charging a man with no prior record, based solely on DNA." Naomi replied, her voice steady, "It's not just DNA, sir. It's DNA matching sweat on the car carpet, matching paint, matching soil from the buried frame, matching false statements. It all tells one story." Ellison studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll sign the preliminary indictment. Prepare the arrest warrant. I want every detail legally sound." That night, Naomi returned to her office, lit only by the desk lamp casting light on stacks of old documents. On the wall, 1971 crime scene photos hung beside new excavation images, piecing together 2 halves of the same mystery. She stared at the class ring inscribed with CB, its faint metallic glint shimmering under glass. Every small piece of evidence Sheriff Campbell and his team had found now formed the foundation of a modern prosecution, as if they, though long gone, were still helping her complete their unfinished case. The next morning, KSP's official report was released internally. Operation Cumberland concluded. Genetic evidence confirms suspect involvement. Case MP 1171 reclassified as homicide investigation. Those words appeared in the database after over 52 years, marking the moment the Somerset disappearance officially became a murder case. Naomi printed the final copy, clipped it into the file, and signed below, "Prepared for prosecution." Outside, Kentucky's sky was clear, sunlight hitting the parking lot where KSP SUVs lined up. She stepped out, coffee in hand, looking south toward Hale's property, hidden behind trees. Everything seemed oddly calm, as if Somerset had no idea that in just days, its past would be unearthed. In that brief moment, Naomi felt clearly that the half-century-long investigation had come full circle, and justice, though delayed, had finally taken shape. When the DNA report was signed and sent to the prosecutor's office, Naomi Whitaker knew there was no more waiting. Every link fit the sweat sample matching the 1971 evidence, false statements, witness confirmation, and buried physical evidence. The arrest warrant was approved that afternoon, stamped with the red seal of the Pulaski County Court, reading clearly, Commonwealth of Kentucky v. Marvin Hale, arrest warrant for first-degree murder. Naomi held the warrant, the cold paper pressing into her skin. She called the task force, voice firm, "We move tonight." Somerset's sky was misty as 3 KSP SUVs quietly parked near Mount Olive Baptist Church, where Hale attended every weekend. Inside, the organ played softly, pews filled with parishioners, the air thick with pine and incense. In the back row, Marvin Hale sat silently, clutching a Bible, his posture stooped but eyes sharp. From the rear door, Naomi and 2 officers entered as the sermon neared its end. Her voice cut through the quiet, "Mr. Marvin Hale." Heads turned, seeing 3 plainclothes officers approach. Hale looked up, his face flickering with surprise. Naomi presented the warrant, reading aloud, "By order of the Pulaski County Court, you are under arrest for first-degree murder, in the disappearance of Caleb Brown and Lisa Carter." The church was silent, not a breath heard. Hale blinked, standing slowly, his voice raspy. "After 50 years, you still won't let that go," Naomi replied, low but firm. "Justice never lets go." Outside, a light drizzle fell. Headlights from the police vehicles lit up the church's gray stone wall. As Hale was led out, murmurs rose among the curious crowd. Some recognized him, gasping in shock. Others stood frozen, unable to believe the quiet mechanic they'd known for decades was a suspect in Pulaski County's most haunting case. Hale didn't resist, head bowed, eyes fixed on the wet ground. As the police car pulled away from the church, a second KSP forensic team executed an emergency search warrant at Hale's home. The small log cabin, nestled among pines just miles from the old garage, was eerily quiet. The front door was locked, but yielded easily. Inside, the room was unnervingly tidy, furniture neatly arranged, black and white photos from the 70s on shelves, showing a young Hale beside a Chevrolet C10 truck. On the desk lay a thick leather-bound maintenance log, and loose notes. A technician opened the log, pausing at a handwritten entry. C10, repaint yellow, replace carpet, sold Lexington. The note matched the vehicle sale report from 2 years after the disappearance. In a drawer below, they found a crumpled map, marked with red ink at Red Creek Quarry, the exact site where the car frame was found. All items were seized, sealed, labeled specimen 12AE, 12D, and logged with the collector's name, time and location. At KSP headquarters, Hale sat in a small interrogation room, white lights highlighting his gaunt face. Naomi entered, setting the file on the table, saying nothing at first. On the table were the class ring inscribed with CB, and the newly seized map. Hale glanced at them, his lips twitching. "I didn't do anything," he said, voice hoarse, hands trembling slightly. Naomi responded, "We have your DNA in the car, Caleb Brown's DNA, on the seat fabric, and the map to the quarry, where you buried the frame. What do you say to that?" Hale stared at the photo, silent. The interrogation lasted over an hour, with him repeating only, "It was an accident, just an accident." That afternoon, at KSP headquarters in Frankfort, Lieutenant Colonel Dennis Holloway held the first press conference. Behind the podium, evidence was displayed in glass cases: the class ring, paint fragment, map, maintenance log. He announced, after 52 years, through modern DNA technology and relentless investigative work, we have identified Marvin Hale as directly responsible for the 1971 Somerset disappearance. Case MP 1171 is officially reopened. The statement echoed through the room, mingling with the sound of reporters' cameras. Naomi stood in the back, quietly watching the screen displaying photos of 2 teenagers, Caleb Brown and Lisa Carter, their 1971 smiles now gazing down. As the press conference ended, outside the headquarters, the rain had stopped, the sky turning a soft orange at dusk. Naomi stepped onto the porch, still holding the file. She felt both heavy and relieved, heavy with the looming trial ahead, but relieved that the circle of time had closed. She looked south, where Lake Cumberland shimmered in the evening light, and whispered to herself, 50 years of silence, now justice has a voice. The KSP interrogation room glowed under harsh fluorescent lights, its white walls cold, the steady hum of the recording device cutting through the prolonged silence. Marvin Hale sat at the table's end, hands clasped, wrists still marked by handcuffs, his eyes weary, but wary. Across from him were Sergeant Naomi Whitaker and Investigator Ryan Ford, both silent for the first few seconds, letting the void pressure him to speak first. Hale avoided their gaze, glancing at the camera-mounted glass in the corner. Naomi opened the file, pulling out a thick report and spreading it before him. "Mr. Hale," she said slowly, "we're investigating the 1971 disappearance, now confirmed as a homicide. I'll review the evidence again, giving you a chance to respond." Her voice was even, cold and clear, each word carefully measured. She began with the DNA results. The sweat sample from the 1971 car carpet matched Hale's toothbrush DNA at 99.9, 94%. Additionally, carpet fibers and yellow paint fragments from the old evidence matched a 1971 Chevrolet C10 registered to him. Naomi placed microscope printouts on the table, one of the fabric fibers, another of the carpet from Hale's former vehicle, nearly identical. Hale glanced briefly, saying nothing. She moved to the third photo, the class ring inscribed, CB, found in his junkyard. "Can you explain why this was in your scrap pile?" she asked, voice still calm. Hale swallowed hard, his voice rough. "I don't know. Lots of cars came through back then. I don't remember them all." Naomi tilted her head, "But that area wasn't an open shop. Only you and two main mechanics had access. Both are deceased. Who else could have left the ring there but you?" The air grew thick. Ryan Ford opened the old maintenance log, found at Hale's house, pointing to a handwritten note. C10, repaint yellow, sold Lexington. "This is your writing, correct?" Hale nodded faintly. "Where's that truck now?" Ryan pressed. "I sold it long ago." "Do you remember the buyer?" "No, it's been too long." Naomi interlaced her fingers, staring directly at him. "You don't recall the buyer, but you vividly remember giving directions in 1971. That's odd." Hale looked away, his breath heavy. She continued. "Witness Raymond Young, the night shift gas station clerk, confirmed seeing you after midnight. That night, your shirt covered in mud. You told him you were pushing a customer's car up a hill, but it didn't rain that day. How do you explain that?" Hale gripped his hands tighter. "I don't remember. Maybe I got the day wrong." Naomi leaned forward. "You didn't get it wrong, Mr. Hale. Every detail aligns with June 5, 1971. In the corner the clock ticked." Hale breathed heavily, head bowed, hands trembling slightly. Naomi shifted to crime scene photos. The excavated car frame, yellow paint, class ring, denim scraps, all found on your property, she said, her voice not loud but heavy. "Can you explain why a 1968 Chevrolet Nova frame was buried there?" Hale's gaze drifted, silent. After a pause, he whispered, "It's been years. I don't remember clearly. Maybe someone dumped it there, I wouldn't know." Naomi leaned closer. "You're saying someone buried a car frame, jeans, a class ring, and motor oil in your junkyard, and by coincidence, your DNA is on the car carpet, along with Caleb Brown's." No response. Ryan noted in the log. Subject remained silent when confronted with DNA evidence. After nearly an hour, Naomi shifted tactics. She softened her tone, resting her hand on the file. "Mr. Hale, I know this long stretch of time isn't easy, but you need to understand, the truth isn't in your hands anymore. It's proven by science. You can help us know what really happened, or let someone else do it for you." Hale looked up, eyes wavering. "I didn't kill anyone," he said, voice heavy. I just wanted to help them fix their car, and they vanished right after leaving your garage." Naomi shot back. He shook his head, trying to speak but failing. The silence stretched, broken only by the steady hum of the recorder. At the session's end, Naomi concluded by reading the transcript aloud. Each line was printed, detailing the time, participants, questions, responses, suspect's demeanor, and a note. Subject denies involvement but fails to provide alibi consistent with timeline. Hale signed below, his shaky handwriting smudging the ink. As he was led out, Naomi lingered, staring at the still warm transcript. She knew his silence wasn't denial, but the familiar sign of someone clinging to a secret too late to hide. That night, the interrogation transcript and full audio were sealed, coded, and submitted to the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office. The attached summary was just 4 lines. All forensic witness and physical evidence consistent with suspect involvement. No valid alternate explanation provided. Probable cause sustained. Case ready for prosecution. Naomi reviewed it one last time before signing. Outside, Kentucky's rain pattered against the window in a steady rhythm. In the room, only the desk lamp's light reflected off the thick file, pages soon to be presented in court. where justice would finally speak. The case of Commonwealth of Kentucky v. Marvin Hale was brought to trial at Somerset Circuit Court, ending over half a century of silence surrounding the disappearance of Caleb Brown and Lisa Carter. Pulaski County Courthouse was packed early, with long lines of reporters and locals standing outside the gates, everyone tense, awaiting the verdict for a case forgotten for 52 years. Inside, white lights shone down on the old wooden courtroom, where the air was thick with the smell of paper and the dust of time. At the prosecution table, Commonwealth's attorney Mark Ellison adjusted his tie, next to Sergeant Naomi Whitaker, who had revived case file MP 1171. Across from them, defense attorney Michael Grant sat beside the defendant, Marvin Hale, his white hair stark, eyes sunken, and hands trembling slightly. Judge Elaine Crawford struck her gavel to open the session, her voice steady. "We are here to try the case of Commonwealth v. Marvin Hale, first-degree murder. Are both sides ready?" Both sides responded in unison. "Yes, Your Honor." Prosecutor Ellison stood, facing the jury, his voice low and firm. In 1971, two teenagers left the Pulaski County Fair in a Chevrolet Nova. They never returned. Today we have evidence showing why, and the person who ensured they never came home is sitting right here. He presented the evidence systematically: DNA from Hale's car mat, perfectly matched biological samples from his toothbrush, with a 99.994% match probability. Yellow paint fragments and carpet fibers found at the scene matched the structure of Hale's 1971 Chevrolet C10. A map of the quarry area and truck maintenance records found at Hale's home confirmed the vehicle was repainted and sold 2 years after the disappearance. Ellison then introduced excavated evidence: the 1968 Nova frame, a class ring engraved with CB denim scraps, and a leather wallet, all found behind Hale's old garage. On a large screen, images appeared: a rusted car frame, a mud-caked silver ring, faded letters spelling out Pulaski High. All eyes in the room turned to the defendant, who sat motionless, lips pressed tight. When the prosecution rested, Naomi was called to testify, recounting the entire process of reopening the case, from discovering the sealed Pulaski 1971 envelope, to restoring evidence, to DNA analysis, and the junkyard excavation. Her voice was calm, each detail clear and coherent, like links connecting past to present. Ellison asked, "Do you have any doubts about the integrity of the evidence chain?" Naomi replied, "None, Your Honor. The chain of custody was fully re-established, every piece of evidence signed and forensically sealed. There's no discrepancy." Her response made the defense attorney frown slightly. Next, the prosecution called Raymond Young, a former gas station worker. Leaning on his cane at the witness stand, his voice raspy but clear, "I remember that night. The two kids stopped for drinks, headed toward Red Creek. Around 11, Hale came back, his shirt muddy. He said he had to push a customer's car, but it was dry that night. No rain." Ellison pressed, "Are you certain it was the night they disappeared?" Raymond nodded, "As sure as I remember the day my daughter was born. I worked the night shift that year, never forgot that face." His testimony silenced the courtroom. The defense began its rebuttal by attacking the age of the evidence and the passage of time. Attorney Grant stood, his voice calm and even, addressing the jury, "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is built on fragments of memory and evidence over 50 years old. Time long enough for things to degrade, for mistakes, for errors in process." He emphasized that Hale was a mechanic, his old junkyard a hub for hundreds of cars, making it entirely possible for materials matching his truck to be found. No witness saw a crime, no bodies were found, no confession exists. The Commonwealth has only DNA numbers and assumptions, he concluded. Glancing at Hale, the defendant remained silent, hands gripping the table's edge. For the final rebuttal, Ellison stepped to the center of the courtroom, holding up a photo of the class ring. "This isn't a number," he said, voice deliberate. "This is Caleb Brown's ring, engraved with his initials, found in Marvin Hale's soil. This is his DNA on the car mat, the fabric, the paint, the oil, the quarry map marking where the frame was buried. You can call it coincidence, but science doesn't, and neither does justice. He turned to the jury, eyes stern. No one escapes their own traces. Judge Crawford called a brief recess before deliberations. Naomi sat in the back, watching Hale through the glass, his eyes vacant. She thought of Sheriff Campbell, who once wrote insufficient evidence in the old case file, and now she had finished the story he left behind. That afternoon, the jury returned after hours of deliberation. The courtroom stood, breathless. The foreman held the verdict, reading slowly, on the charge of first-degree murder, we the jury, find the defendant Marvin Hale guilty. A sharp exhale rose from the gallery, followed by stifled sobs. Hale slumped in his chair, his face expressionless. Judge Crawford struck her gavel, pronouncing the defendant, Marvin Hale, is found guilty of first-degree murder, sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. This court is adjourned. The gavel's echo rang against the red brick walls. As Hale was led away by deputies, camera flashes lit up, reflecting in his hollow eyes. Naomi stood, feeling a faint pang in her chest. Not triumph, but closure. She stepped outside, the Cumberland Lake breeze carrying the scent of fresh grass. On the courthouse steps, late sunlight glinted off the Somerset Circuit Court's bronze plaque, its metal faintly glowing. In that moment, Naomi understood this case was never just about a crime. It was a reminder that truth, no matter how deeply buried, will one day rise to the surface. After the verdict, Marvin Hale remained silent for 3 days in Pulaski County Jail. He ate little, spoke less, staring blankly at the wall, as if the ruling had drained his remaining strength. On the 4th morning, as Sergeant Naomi Whitaker and Prosecutor Mark Ellison arrived to sign transfer papers, Hale suddenly requested a private meeting. In a small interrogation room, light streaming through barred windows onto the table, he sat upright, voice hoarse. If you want real closure, I'll show you where they are. Naomi said nothing, signaling for the recorder. Hale spoke slowly, as if unloading heavy fragments of memory. That night, the boy wanted to test drive the car. I said the road was slick. He laughed, said I got this. The car veered, crashed into the Red Creek quarry edge. The girl screamed, then went quiet. I panicked, didn't know what to do. I towed the car to my shop, dismantled it, buried the frame. They're still in the West Rock Hollow where the trail collapsed. I didn't mean to kill anyone, just wanted to cover it up. The confession was dry. No tears, no pleas. Naomi looked at him for a long moment, then said softly, we'll find them, and you'll sign this statement. Hale nodded, his hand trembling as he signed. That afternoon, KSP sealed off Red Creek Quarry, mined in the 1960s and long abandoned. Overgrown grass and collapsed rock hollows marked the tall moss-covered cliffs. The forensic team and geologists set up a field tent, cordoning off the area Hale described. Naomi watched, holding an old geological map, eyes tracing Hale's scribbled directions. Ground-penetrating radar scanned, detecting anomalies over 2 meters deep. As the first layer of soil was removed, a rusted steel mass emerged, caked in mud and broken rock. Under floodlights, the faint curve of a car body appeared, the remaining frame of the 1968 Nova. A soft cheer rose, then silence fell as a technician called out, "We've got human remains here." Naomi stepped forward, heart pounding. Specialists carefully brushed away mud, cleaning with small brushes. Gradually, 2 partial skeletons emerged, side by side, skulls tilted the same way. A scrap of jeans remained on one leg, a tarnished silver necklace beneath the soil. The sight silenced the team. Naomi said nothing, nodding faintly. She signaled to seal the site and document the evidence chain. The remains were lifted onto specialized stretchers, sealed in black forensic bags, labeled specimen 17A and 17B. Under the prosecutor's office supervision, every step was filmed, signed, and sealed on site. As the forensic convoy left Red Creek, the sun dipped behind the hills, twilight spreading over Lake Cumberland in the distance. Naomi stood watching, a mix of grief and relief rising within, like Somerset could finally breathe after half a century of silence. 2 weeks later, at the Frankfurt Forensic Lab, results were released. DNA from bone marrow perfectly matched Caleb Brown and Lisa Carter's profiles in the NAMUS database. Both died from multiple injuries, skull fractures, and broken ribs, consistent with a high-speed crash. No post-accident violence was found, but the report concluded, cause of death, mechanical trauma consistent with vehicle crash. Circumstances, concealment of evidence. The 27-page report detailed the remains' location, preservation conditions, and identification process, ending in bold, Case MP, 1171. Human remains positively identified. Investigation closed. Naomi read each word, hands clenched but eyes calm. She set the file down, took a deep breath, and called the families, now only distant relatives. On the other end, choked sobs mixed with rustling wind. One voice whispered, "Thank you, now we can bring them home." At the remains handover, the Frankfurt Forensic Lab was quiet. 2 small caskets, draped in Kentucky state flags, held old photos of Caleb and Lisa. Naomi stood at the door, not approaching, just bowing her head. Beside her, Ellison said softly, 52 years, and they're finally called by name. She nodded, voice low, not just them, but justice too. KSP's final report was released soon after. The front page read, Pulaski County 1971, Case MP, 1171, Final Forensic Report, and Legal Closure. The conclusion stated, all forensic testimonial and material evidence confirm Marvin Hale's involvement in concealment and homicide related to the deaths of Caleb Brown and Lisa Carter. Case status closed. Attached were photos of the Red Creek site, excavation maps, and a reconstructed timeline. All were archived in the state's data vault, where the 1971 file once lay forgotten. That evening, Naomi returned to Lake Cumberland, standing on a rocky outcrop overlooking the still water. She thought of Sheriff Roy Campbell, who wrote the final note in the old report, insufficient evidence to determine a crime. Now she had finished his sentence, identified, found, concluded. The distant lake reflected the blue sky, silent as Kentucky's final promise to the lost, that justice, however late, always finds its way back. When the final forensic report was released, Pulaski County 1971, MP, 1171, was officially closed. At a press conference at the Commonwealth's Attorney Office, Mark Ellison stepped to an old wooden podium, camera lights illuminating his face. Behind him, a large sign read, Justice After 52 Years. His voice rang slow and clear. Today we close the disappearance case of Caleb Brown and Lisa Carter, a case that haunted Somerset for half a century. This investigation proves time may fade memory, but it cannot erase truth. He paused, then read the summary. Throughout the reinvestigation, 52 witnesses were interviewed, 118 pieces of evidence collected and analyzed, and 7 DNA samples independently tested at 2 state forensic labs. All point to one conclusion: Marvin Hale was responsible for the deaths of 2 teenagers in 1971, deliberately concealing evidence and the crime. His words marked a full stop to Somerset's longest chapter. In the audience, Naomi Whitaker sat quietly, hands clasped. When Ellison thanked her, the one who revived a file thought forever forgotten, she only nodded slightly. Light fell on an enlarged photo of Caleb and Lisa on the table, their 16 and 17-year-old faces still vivid in memory. Behind them stood a team of investigators, forensic experts, technicians, and townsfolk, who quietly contributed over 2 years, all links in the chain to truth. The final sentence was recorded in the state's legal system. Marvin Hale, guilty of first-degree murder, life imprisonment, without parole. Judge Elaine Crawford signed the verdict and transfer order to Franklin Correctional Facility, where he would serve until death. A line from the ruling was widely quoted: "There is no statute of limitations for truth. When a person carries guilt, darkness may follow them a lifetime, until light finds them." From a law enforcement perspective, the case became a milestone in Kentucky's investigative history. The State Justice Department requested the entire file, evidence chain, and forensic data be archived in the National Cold Case Database. Coded NC 1171KY, noted as oldest successfully prosecuted cold case in state history. Law schools and criminal justice academies used it as a prime example of DNA evidence and long-term evidence management. The KSP team received a special commendation from the governor for achievement beyond time. But beyond the legal realm, Somerset didn't easily return to peace. The tight-knit community was deeply divided. Some felt justice was finally served. Others couldn't believe the man who lived quietly, helping others for decades, was a killer. Mount Olive Church hung a banner reading "Pray for Forgiveness," while City Hall flew flags at half-mast for 3 days in memory of the victims. The Somerset Herald wrote, "This town lived with a secret for over half a century. Now, as that secret is unearthed, we don't just find truth, we confront ourselves." The victims' families received their ashes in a simple memorial by Lake Cumberland. Hundreds attended, bringing white flowers and balloons, released onto the calm water. As the wind blew, flowers drifted toward Red Creek Hill, once a symbol of loss, now a place of rest. Naomi stood at a distance, the breeze lifting her scarf. She watched the crowd, heard whispered prayers, then bowed her head. A middle-aged woman, Lisa's niece, approached, saying softly, "Thank you, you made sure they're not forgotten." Naomi only smiled, eyes on the sunlit lake. In KSP's internal final report, the last line was bolded: "All forensic testimonial and documentary evidence confirm closure of case MP 1171. Justice served. 52 years delayed, not denied." Those words spread across agencies, becoming the year's most quoted line. Major outlets like Louisville Courier and USA Today covered the story, calling Somerset proof that time doesn't kill justice, only tests it. For Naomi, looking back, she knew this journey closed not just for the victims' families, but for investigators who failed before. In her small Frankfurt office, case MP 1171 now sat in a glass cabinet with hundreds of other cold cases. On its cover, a new label replaced the faded one: "Resolved, 2023. She touched the glass, whispering to herself, "Justice never forgets anyone." Outside, Somerset returned to normal. Markets opened, church bells rang, children played by the lake. But those who lived through 1971 still remembered that fair night, and two names that stayed with them: Caleb Brown and Lisa Carter. Each year, on the anniversary of their loss, Mount Olive Church lights 2 candles on its steps, their faint glow reflecting off stone statues and onto Lake Cumberland's still surface. And somewhere, people still recall the line from that sentencing day, the line that closed a chapter of Kentucky history. Justice may arrive late, but when it does, it makes time bow. The story of the Kentucky 1971 cold case is not just a gripping legal journey, but a profound reflection of a truth in modern American life. Justice can be delayed, but it never vanishes. Over half a century, seemingly trivial evidence, a green scarf, yellow paint, a Pulaski high-class ring, became the bridge between past and present, thanks to persistence and forensic science. In today's America, where trust in institutions and the justice system is sometimes tested, This case is a powerful reminder that truth takes time, but time cannot hide truth. Sergeant Naomi Whitaker represents a new generation of American investigators, those who trust technology, data, and transparency, yet still honor justice in the classic sense, with patience, professional ethics, and respect for the departed. The deeper lesson lies not just in a killer punished, but in the meaning of social responsibility. Small errors in evidence management, community indifference, or lost faith can let justice sleep for decades. In an America increasingly reliant on data and technology, this case reminds us that progress only matters when paired with memory. Memory of what was lost, of those once forgotten. If Somerset 1971 was a symbol of silence, today's America must be a symbol of transparency, where no one is forgotten and no truth stays buried forever. Thank you for following the Somerset case to its end, where justice, after 52 years, was finally named. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to join us in exploring more cases, seemingly buried by time, still waiting to be brought to light in America.